Okay, my name is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is Thursday, March 10th, and I'm interviewing Richard Whitman as part of the Oklahoma Native Artists Project for the Oklahoma Oral Histories Research Program at Oklahoma State University. We're at Richard's studio in Oklahoma City. Richard, you're a multimedia artist who's used your work to draw attention to social issues, land resources, and native language for a long time. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Thank you, Julie. Fasen, Yuchi akina, Yuchi hasawede tole, kaka isawede. I said, good afternoon. You're welcome. And I will be speaking in English. I speak your language as well. I'm from a little community. I'm a Yuchi, Soyaha, we call ourselves in our language. Soyaha. I'm from a little community, Gypsy, Oklahoma, south of Bristow Creek County, Iron Post, Sand Creek, Ceremonial Ground, Mudloki Methodist Church. But I was born in Claremore Indian Hospital. And spent some early summers in Pawnee, Red Rock, Oklahoma. But my orientation, how I began, is from Gypsy, Oklahoma, in a Yuchi household. So quite often I'm always asked, if I consider myself an Indian artist, traditional Indian artist, artist first, or native artist, artist at large. Well, for me, it's already a given, in the sense of what I was born into, my birthright, is a Yuchi being. And from there I can become anything. So I was raised in a Yuchi household, a non-nuclear family, if you will. And the Yuchi language was the language of the household.
That's wonderful, because there aren't a whole lot of Yuchi speakers, as I understand it.
Yes, very threatened language, endangered language, and but a great program going on, an immersion program, like a lot of tribal peoples, tribal language groups, immersion programs, and so we have one that's making ground.
And you're Yuchi and Pawnee, but you didn't really have, you were raised Yuchi, not a lot of exposure to the Pawnee side of your family. What is the first art experience you remember growing up?
Well, once again, I would say it goes back. Of course, today I'm a visual artist, but I feel sometimes that can be a challenge, or we can place limitations on ourselves by visual artists, in a sense. My artists, well, of course, I grew up with big cheap tablets too, in grade school, and
did a lot of drawing.
yeah, and so drawing, I guess, was it. But I think, the non-nuclear family, I remember it was a very crowded little shotgun house, and different people would be staying with us, so it was the extended family. So it was only when I went to first or second grade elementary school that I seen the nuclear family in the little books, father, mother, Dick, Sally, Spot, Puff, the pure nuclear family. So when I would see that, I'd go home.
Or the 50s version.
Right, so it was, but so I would say that, how I began.
With your mom's parents as well.
Yeah, and then the extended family there, and so it was, spent a great deal of time outdoors. And now when I think about it, a great deal of freedom. And playing outdoors, drawing in the sand, so we didn't have big bookshelves,
and
so there was no art, there was no references to the European masters, so if we didn't have any books, they weren't in the home. So it was obviously a different kind of education.
Right. Was your grandma or your mom a sewer, or
oh yes,
great
quilts,
quilts?
So it was that kind of hand making, creating whatever was at hand to create with, or weaving strips my grandmother. So very practical and very crafty.
What experiences with art did you have in public school?
Well, very limited. I mean, I would say my high school art, of course, you know, was the arts was very, well, in my high school experience, very limited, you know. I mean, my art teacher was actually the assistant football coach, you know, so if you perform well on the football field, that was the main criteria. This is Oklahoma, you know.
Right.
So it's football, it's sports, and then the other options, you know, band or music, you know, but anyway, you know, of course, really my first reference as a grade school was like Mad Magazine, you know.
Okay.
Mad Magazines really was my
And
art book.
comic books?
Or my comic books, or art Bible was Mad Magazine, you know. Let me worry. A little later in my life today, it would be not my motto, but a great boost, you know.
What about your first exposure to like what they call traditional, kind of flat style Indian painting, or do you remember some of the first works of Indian art you saw in painting?
Oh yeah, of course, obviously in high school was Jerome Tiger, you know. Used to go to the Philbrook Art Show, and
oh, you did? You used to go to the annual?
60s annual, 60s, and
did you enter the annual?
oh yeah, we did well, you know. By then I had arrived in Santa Fe in '68.
Oh, so you were coming out.
Yeah,
right.
so then we submitted work to it and tried to sort of open up. Yeah, I remember Ranshood and, you know, and Fred Beaver. They're real flat. But then I began to say, well, there's something I really couldn't relate to there in a way too. You know, I mean, it's, you want to respect it, but then I felt it very limiting too. You know, and because I'd arrived in Santa Fe at that time, you know,
right.
and the '60s. So, but I, you know, I don't know, when they say traditional art, you know, I said, well, you know, I in some real ways, I grew up in what you would say a traditional way, you know. I grew up with an outdoor shitter, you know, and a shotgun house, and a language first besides English. And so I said, wow, you know, but you were thinking, well, we were poor, we didn't know it, but as you get older, then you're poor and you do know it. And or you quickly get sensitized, you know. So that I began to see the inequities, I guess.
When did you kind of start thinking of yourself as an artist? Was it before you went to the Institute? And when did you go? How old were you?
Well, no, I think I didn't really embrace being an artist. Of course, you know, then I was not encouraged during the Vietnam War, and my older brother was in Vietnam.
I see.
It was the military code, couldn't draft the next surviving son. And so I really hadn't considered joining the armed services was our way out of the community. So I don't know if it's a matter of just being overly patriotic, but it was a way out, you know.
Right,
I mean, for me,
mobility.
To go to Omaha Tech or go to Tulsa Welding School, you know.
Right.
Or pump gas or work for the local farmer, rancher. And nothing wrong with that. But something took me out of there, away from there, and it was the arts, and it was
How'd you find out about it?
Life magazine, a 1969 copy of Life magazine. You know, and I researched and found it was the first issue of Life that they ever had, like an Indian, because it was like a photographic cover magazine, totally a photo magazine, Life magazine. That cover was an Indian cover.
Wow.
With a graphic design done by a student from IIA. It was the 60s, you know, it was a alternative counterculture, 60s, music, drugs, lifestyle, and the Vietnam War. But in that issue was like a 6-page layout spread on the Institute of Magnetic Arts. Wow, so it was very intriguing to me. And they would accept you at that time with a bad high school transcript. So I could handily supply that. But they also went on the merit of your portfolio.
I see.
So that was a great balance for me.
You had to submit some
portfolio, samples of work, portfolio, and reluctantly the high school transcript. So, but anyway.
Okay, so you went while you were in your senior year.
Yeah, and my graduating year was '67, and I messed up my senior year, so I didn't graduate until '68. You know, and so I belonged to 2 graduating classes, and so
So what aspects of the Institute stood out for you while you were there?
Well, it was this late 60s, a dynamic time, and here was a school, an art institute, culture institute that created in 1962 with the ideal, the concept of embracing your culture, building from it, exploring with it, embracing it. So it was a total departure from the whole Indian boarding school. The
Right.
remake you,
Right.
kill the Indian in you, and so it was a new, really a radical ideal, and fortunately for me, I arrived at a great time there, in the '60s, with like-minded, likewise, fellow students from reservations, urban areas, Oklahoma, Indian country, just a wide range of backgrounds and tribal affiliations. So, and great energies, it was really a great time when I think about it, to explore.
Some of the students that you hung out with, some of your
Well, today,
classmates?
of course, and it was, like I said, it was during the Vietnam War, and so I always want to say that I literally met T.C. Cannon through his letters. He was in Vietnam. He would write letters back to the Institute of American Arts to be read and shared with the studios. And so I was volunteered or asked to read his letters in the studios. Advanced, intermediate, beginning painting, and actually read them in dorm meetings and just general gatherings on campus, assemblies, student assemblies, and would read his letters.
Wow.
And then I, met him in person a couple of years later, But,
I hope the school kept those letters.
yeah, and I think his state today, his sister and many friends treasure those letters. And fellow students for me, I guess today would be, like Dan Naming Ha, and very, owns his own gallery in Santa Fe and is successful in the sense of a presence in the art world,
Right.
and economically and.
I saw a picture of you with Gina Gray. And a group of
Gina
people.
Gray, I remember Gina
Earl
Gray,
Biss,
yes, Earl Biss, Kevin Red Star, the II alumni, but I would say the
Right.
'60s, but a great many of artists who, it's a very small percentile of artists who can make a direct living from their work.
Right.
You must have another livelihood. Or the great pie in the sky, inheritance, something to carry. But I think from time to time, I had the occasion to meet someone from that era, '60s, and we were always asking about so-and-so, that's gone on, deceased,
Right.
or passed on, went on, and then we always ask you, who is still making art from our time, our era? And there's still, I might add, and we always wonder about certain people,
Right.
Wow, he's a great artist or a great sculpture.
What happened?
What happened to him? Well, last time I heard he was in the oil field, or he, couldn't make a direct living from his work, and so you always wonder about people. I do, because really great energies, and the work was left there in the collection.
Yeah.
So I wonder, some people have had to move on to other livelihoods and circumstances.
What subjects did you focus on while you were there?
Well, I rarely went to class. No, my first teacher was Atale Lolema,
Okay.
Hopi. At the time, was married to Charles Lolema.
Right.
Very interesting concept. They hired their faculty staff was really working artists. Alan Hauser, Charles Lolema. And they balanced it with degreed or trained teaching certified art teachers. It was a great balance, because
Yes.
you're talking about Charles Lolema, renowned for turned jewelry around
Yes.
traditionally, and course, Alan Hauser's story is his own as well for sculpture. I arrived there just in time too, and I caught Alan Fritz Schilder, 68, 69, at a drawing class and beginning painting, and so that was good, you know, I mean, faculty and artists, but I think I was very influenced as well by my fellow students, as well as by, you know, by encouragement of your painting instructor. But I began with Atelier Lolona, Hopi, and then moved across the hall to Fritz Schilder's. And but I remember walking to the studio once when I arrived, and there was some music at the time playing, you know, 60s rock, drug infused, but these huge canvases, scale, 7, 8 foot paintings, and it was before headphones, but very alive, the energy, huge, broad brushes. The supplies were made available, canvas, huge rolls of canvas, acrylic oils, brushes. And then across the hall was, well, I wouldn't say traditional painting, but there was Indian music playing, you know, and a different, but great energy as well.
What a great.
And so there it was, and so it was hard not to, so you go, you know, I'd wander back and forth. But great energy, and visual energy, visual language. And then I think it was, you know, to be an artist, you almost had to be a painter. But arriving there, you've seen these other mediums, other disciplines.
What about photography? Did you study it formally at the Institute?
No, but you know, it was sort of, there was a Kay Weiss was, you know, she was a professional photographer as well, and sort of the Ansel Adams School, you know, New Mexico. And it was sort of the yearbook, campus paper, newspaper, you know, staff, student photography. But she did offer it, but it was really, it was only a few years later that I really explored it.
I see.
We began as a painter, you know, and I was very insecure about our artist's identity to be a painter or a sculptor.
Right.
And it was jewelry. Then, of course, I offered these great, and it was creative writing, you know, drama, theater, dance.
Did you participate in the theater program a bit, or the creative writing?
Yeah, they tried to, creative writing.
Okay.
I got into there for a couple of years, couple of semesters, and but then of course the dance teacher was always trying to encourage it, but you know, we were too masculine.
Was Rosalie
We were
Jones?
too men. We
Yes.
were too manly, masculine. Can't do that. But there were some great dancers as well, you know, traditional dancers and the modern dance. So it was really, when I think about that, we sort of impose our own, one imposes their own limitations because you feel threatened or you're not strong enough or freedom. But a couple of years later, I sort of embraced it, and I sought out the photography as well.
Right. And you went to Wounded Knee in 1973, and that was sort of a pivotal, kind of a turning point for you, I guess, in your, well, first let's go to Caltech. I sort of want to ask you about Caltech. You transferred?
California Institute of the Arts.
Okay.
CalArts. There came recruiting there to Santa Fe, and I forget how many that year signed up, to go to CalArts. And of course, when I arrived there, I realized, you know, that some of the students didn't show up. It was 72, I think, you know. And prior to that, I was living in Santa Fe. We finished school there, and there was a community film project that came out of Chicago or Philadelphia, New York City, and they picked certain cities for the black community, black filmmakers, Latinos. And Santa Fe was selected. Their campus was selected to host this community film workshop to encourage or train young Native filmmakers. And George Bordeaux, Blackfoot, in the early 60s IUI alumni, was the director and instructor. So we hooked on to that program. So I stuck around for 71, 72, and was living there, and did the starring artist thing. And so But the community film workshop was great. And then this recruiter came from Cal Arts. And so we met him and he looked at the portfolios and our work. And so we got accepted. And but I thought, you know, of course I was so idealistic and so egotistical that I thought I was accepted totally on the merit of my portfolio. When I arrived, I realized they were meeting their minority quota as well. You know, they didn't have any Native Americans in their student population, and so some students showed up and some didn't. You know, and so I felt a little alone there, but a great school. And I learned later that it was a very prestigious school, you know, Cal Arts, and even today. But at the time, I felt a little alienated. If just a couple more students would have showed up, I think and then instead of a full scholarship, it was based on that one semester. In the second semester, my local tribe, the Muscogee Creek Nation, wouldn't fund it, or my balanced tuition, because it was an out-of-state school and an art school at that. We will send you to pipe fitting school in Chicago, but art school, come on. But anyway, so Cal Arts was really a good experience. It got me to Los Angeles and ran into long lost cousins who had signed up for relocation in the 50s, and I basically hadn't seen some of these people since they left our community in grade school, 55, 56, 57, and when I ran into them, they were students at UCLA, and basically, I guess, came back in Oklahoma in the summers and visit every few years, but essentially, I basically grew up in Los Angeles, greater Los Angeles, but a huge urban Indian community historically in Los Angeles Indian Center, and so it was really another step for me.
So that was as much of an education as the Caltech classes.
Yeah, I think, Gypsy to Santa Fe.
Yes.
Those were my stepping stones, Santa Fe to Los Angeles.
When did you get a hold of a camera? Were you taking photographs?
Yeah, when I left Santa Fe.
Okay.
70, 71. A great pawn shop camera, a 2.25, double reflex lens, I guess. And but then the community film workshop provided us with cameras, and it was high 8, 16 millimeter, Bolex, 16 millimeters. So that it was really a great intro to that community film workshop with George Bordeaux, and that was a great model for a number of years there. Really got the possibilities of being behind the camera. We were so ready to be in front of the camera always, and dandied up for the camera,
So was the next kind of pivotal moment then when you went to Wounded Knee in 73?
Yeah, yes, definitely. But then I was in this limbo because of no funding balance for the second semester. So I went down then I was going down to LA because Cal Arts was north of Los Angeles, Valencia, Newhall area. So I would catch a bus or catch a ride with some students going to Cal Arts. And sometimes my cousins, Gladys McPondon, would come up to Cal Arts and pick me up. And so I started spending more and more time in LA. And then I went to this meeting at UCLA at some students, and Wounded Knee was on TV for second or third day, and it was this media blackout of it. And so they had a meeting off campus, students, non-students. So it was this big meeting one evening, and so I went down, and that night it was a big meeting, and a couple of 2 or 3 women, actually, Native women, stood up and said, "We're going to drive up tonight. If any of you men..."
The challenge was...
Oh yeah, so wow. That was a great challenge. So, there was this, media blackout, essentially.
Yeah, I don't think people are as aware of this.
So we went, and they set a time to come back, a meeting space, and so it's 3 or 4 cars drove out of LA. And so I had a jean jacket and a t-shirt, and woke up, we were in Las Vegas, Reno, Nevada, next thing was Nebraska, and Yeah, so another very major pivotal stepping stone in my life was at that time, and really in the sense of an artist, culture worker, it really made me redefine or look at being, but then I realized in the Santa Fe experience that a strong case for being an artist. But I think the political ramifications of being an artist as well. You know, when one looks around the world, you see artists, and I begin to look, you know, in Guatemala and Central and South America, the indigenous struggles there, for me, were artists, the writer, community culture activists were always in the forefront of those struggles, and even today, and for the most part, those are the ones that were arrested, incarcerated, murdered. So I began to see that the real power
Of art that really takes on those.
yeah,
those issues.
art has its greater capacity. It's not just necessarily art for sale, or art for the gallery, or art to hang above the sofa, or, and I'm not downplaying it, I'm just saying that the art is much bigger. So I hadn't known that. But the experience at Wounded Knee, and a number of II alumni, you know, arrived there and was there, and in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, and the alumni from there that I ran, and so I was on their land, on their turf, if you will. So it's another way of meeting them and being supportive, or their guest, to stand with them, you know, and to re-meet even after being students in Santa Fe at II.
I think one of the first works of art that I saw by you was the Street Chiefs series. And can you explain the term Street Chief and talk a little bit about what inspired that series for you?
Well, I think the time was when I returned from Wounded Knee, '73. But prior to that, I'd ridden a Greyhound bus here to Santa Fe in '60, '68, and Tulsa to Oklahoma City, you know, Amarillo, Albuquerque. But the stopover in Oklahoma City, of course, then the Greyhound bus station was near downtown, Sheridan, Reno, Skid Row, if you will. And so there was really, for me, very high visible numbers of Native people. And then when I returned from India, I was seeking my mother, and she had an address in Oklahoma City, and that's how I sort of arrived in Oklahoma City, and then began to, it was before Native American centers, American Indian centers, or urban centers for Native people. So really the first place you go inquire about someone, you go to an Indian bar. I did. Do you know so-and-so? Yes, I'm so-and-so's son. Did they come in, or, you know, they would make some, so there was part of this sort of network before there was any established social advocacy centers for. So I found this address from my mother, and then, but it was on Skid Row, but there was this voice, I remember this voice came out of this, and so I had this old camera, you know, a beginner's camera, and one was confiscated at Wounded Knee, my Pentax 1000.
Oh, wow.
The beginner's camera, the ultimate, no distractions, just pointing. But, so, you know, my friends always teased me that my first collectors were the FBI.
Yeah.
Confiscated my little Pentax.
Yes.
And about a dozen rolls of black and white film, plus X.
Oh my gosh.
And of course, we filed for it several times.
I was going to say.
But it was never returned.
Never got
so,
back.
you know, good luck. But,
yeah.
I'm sure it's, at that time, you know, they had
It's
funny, had
somewhere in the
photos from the
government files.
inside, you know, and But no, then I, landed another camera, but then I began to pack a camera and then go down the streets, and I was did the whole thing myself on the streets, plaz in the daytime and the hustle scuffing on the streets. And but once I remember there's this voice, those storefronts are all torn out now. There are all these empty, abandoned storefronts and Skid Row bars, and this voice came out of this little dark doorway, and it was in the Yuchi language. So, why ain't you? Where you think you're going, or something like that. It was kind of this person just recognized me, but it was in the language. So that caught me, but so I just stepped back. Yondale, it says, you know me? Like that. I remember it was this man, and he would disappear from our community from time to time, and he had enough respect, for his family and their name, and that when he'd go on his binges, and he was alcoholic, and at least he would get out away from the community and he'd go to Tulsa or Oklahoma City, and so he could blend in, be anonymous in a way, and so he'd go for months and he'd come back, and so it was him, it's a big chick. But anyway, so he teased me around and gave him some change. But yeah, I began to see these, and of course there was several other tribal affiliated people, sharing the jug, and seeing these beautiful men, their own histories, and so it was something I didn't understand. I think I was drawn to it in a way I didn't know at the time. I still don't know what moved me. I didn't have any intentions of that becoming the street chiefs. I began to, and there was a lot of mistrust of me, of the camera.
Because there's all that historical baggage.
Yeah, and so they didn't know what I was up to, using these, and so I, even though I was native myself with the camera, it was still a mistrust. It took me years, just being there myself. And, but I think I was drawn to it because it was something I didn't understand. I didn't understand the circumstances that I can be homeless, or a life, ways, style, if you will. Homeless, or vagrant, or down and out from your, because I came from a rural community, it was supportive, even though, families, it was supportive. So I didn't understand it, I think, for the most part. When I think about it now, I think I didn't understand it. I was drawn to that, not to romanticize it. I didn't want to be like that. But I didn't also want to be judgmental with it. And that was always my concern, is for it to be non-judgmental with the lens. And when I revisit some of the photos, I look at those men, I remember them. They helped me. And but I remember they looked right back at me. They looked right at me. And so it was not necessarily just through the lens, mechanical way it was, but
it was a connecting that you did. And you said something really eloquent, I think, that you reject those comparisons with, some of the other, like, social Depression era photographers like Dorothea Lange, because you said, I'm not a visitor to my experience, and I don't leave that world when I finish shooting. It's amazing. I think the quintessential photo that I'd like you to talk about a little bit is, for me anyway, from that series, is this Indian man on the street, and he's standing underneath that sign that says, "Buy Oklahoma." Can you talk about shooting that picture?
Of course, the had to be in the late 70s, the Department of Commerce or the Department of Agriculture, someone had this promotion, you know, then by Oklahoma, and of course it was the cowboy and Indian, you know, image and logo. But I'd seen that billboard on numerous sites, and but you know, I shot it by itself. But anyway, this particular man I'd befriended, and he was Kiowa man, and known him, and he was in some earlier images, and I titled him Street Patriarch. But I knew him because I began to know these men over the years, and they came from these great lineages, great family, descendants of chiefs, or just, so they're great histories, and their own personal histories for that matter, you know. But just that day I caught him because this billboard was near this aluminum recycling, where they, you know, sell cans and aluminum, whatever they find. And so by the time I turned around there, he was coming as it was there. You know, I didn't go get him and
I see.
stage him there. It was just,
Yeah, he was.
there was a little aluminum recycle place to sell your aluminum, and he was on his way back from there. And then there was, I turned around and there was the billboard I forgot about, and there he was. I said, wow.
Wow.
So he was an equal, not a player in it, but the serendipity or something like that. It was just there, bam.
Right.
He was there, and of course I was always amazed, you know, and you know, of course, context is always important in anything, politics, history, you know, life in general, arts for sure. And so I remember there was an exhibition that was touring across the country, and it originated on the East Coast, Homeless in America. But basically the focus was urban homelessness, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, and then the West Coast. And so it was coming through here to the Oklahoma Photography Museum. And so I tried to hook on my street chiefs, and so they, but anyway, we finally worked it out. But once again, it was context. So they said, what's special about this native homelessness, you know, aside from the obvious contradiction, homeless in your own homeland, you know, but that's what, you know, context and historical displacement. Just as arriving in Oklahoma, for the most part, you know, I mean, a handful who are indigenous, but we make this our home. And but context. So finally, I had to sort of stand by the work and explain it. Or, you know, there's always the risk of over-explaining, but sometimes it's necessary. But anyways, they let me hook on.
But they did show your work.
Gave me a space with a traveling exhibit, and so in the opening. But anyway, so it was good in that sense, you know. Then it was to buy Oklahoma.
Right.
I built it around that image for my arguing points.
Were you able to make any kind of living from the sale of some of those photographs in the early days?
No.
Did you print any?
No.
Okay.
They were, even today, I try to keep them together, and I wanted them to remain together. And
I see.
And
you didn't want to do reproductions?
Well, you know, very, very helpful for me in the 80s was Edgar Hippoberts, who seemed to work, and so you need to get it out there. It needs to be shared, and
right.
a way to push, not just push the works, but push the perimeters of photography or art or native art. And so he was very encouraging, and managed some sites and made some real relevant connections for me in terms of some art organizations, art
So that you started
spaces.
connecting with museums and
right.
institutions a little bit more.
And the same, you know, in some native curators and probably native art historians even argued that it was showing a negative side of Indian culture, and but no, I never made any money. You know, it was never my intent. And I don't know how one makes money. I mean, I was trying to get a book deal once.
Yeah.
But if you do, is it too late for me? Can I cut a deal here at this? be on record, off record?
I've been thinking about that a lot because it's beautiful work, it's important work. I know people, you know, a lot of people are moved by it, maybe not huge mass audiences, but it's kind of like if you do the kind of work you do, and Edgar does, etc., they're kind of like these parallel worlds, the commercial, you know, and they're both fine art in a way. If you know, these labels are frustrating, but there's the work that has a ready market, you know, commercial market, a big mass audience, and there's this other kind of work equally important, and it's a struggle to survive doing that kind of work.
Fortunately, I'm one of those artists. I think the work, you're right, Julie, if the photo, the image, or the subject, if you will, can move you, make you feel. First, I think, you know, your reference to the by Homeland, it's a visual image, so it makes you want to see. Then it makes you curious. Well, what is? So it's a way of engaging you, the viewer. So then I think the work is successful in a sense. Perhaps not economically successful, but successful in the sense of the. And I'm not a purist, you know, and definitely not a romantic for that. But I didn't want the work to be. I wanted the work because it was a disturbing scenario, disturbing circumstance to me. And so I definitely didn't want the work to be romanticized, or the subject or that circumstance. But I wanted it to be explored, or to be considered.
Exactly.
Wow, how did they? You know, over the years, you know, since the 70s and 80s, this work and the Street Chiefs, and I meet a grandson or granddaughter, and he was, that was my grandfather, or that was my grandma's brother, or so and so, or aunt, and so I think that's, I mean, for me, when I think about it now, that those kind of returns from descendants are that they can identify with that particular person in the photo. So in some cases, maybe they're only reference to that person, or not the only, but the visual. So I think that's important, even if I never knew some sides of my family, a large part. And, so to see a photograph of my grandfather once in the Sapulp at the Historical Society, and they made me a copy. Martha Wildcat, one of our elders, told me, she gave me this photo, a small photo, 20 years ago, and says, "This is your grandpa, Long George, old man Long George." I'd never seen him. He had passed on before I came along, you know. So I think, you know, it may be an anonymous historical photo in the Historical Society there, but with me, I could make the connection.
Right. So
I think from time to time, the possibilities of that, you know, could be helpful.
Right.
And that's also, in that sense, I'm not a pure photographer, or a pure portrait photographer, or fine art photographer. But it's a medium to be used. It's a medium, and hence, you know, a mixed media or a multimedia. But I had no expertise in none of them.
Well, your Homeland series, which came out, I guess, in '92, or was exhibited, were those all collages, or was that?
Oh yeah, the Homeland series.
Can you talk about that series a bit?
Kind of the box constructions too, and the photo, painting, collage,
yes.
Text, poems. Well, you know, I'm very big on this in my latter part of my life, as I've matured, as we like to say. I have my actual responsibility. But no, I think it's about one's, not just my tribal mythology, you know, as a Yuchi citizen, but it's about my personal mythology as well, you know. So I think, or one's lived experience, and so those collages came from that, you know. And I began to look at myself as why I'm paying rent. I was, where's my pie in the sky? I'm waiting for my great inheritance, and how am I participating in sort of promoting my own demise here, you know? So those.
In what way then?
Well, I mean, promoting my in the sense of not having any political awareness. Just sort of the top side. I mean, that, you know, the context, you know, in my personal family, you know, not having access to land to build on, to live on, and so yeah, that part of that homeland, you know, it's about the homeland, and it's before, you know, the very popular image poster and T-shirt now. Homeland security,
right,
you know,
right.
Fighting terrorism.
It was before that.
So, but you know, I think if one looks at you look abroad, you look at world, the lack of world peace, and but then actually one must look in their own backyard, you know, and
So there's a little bit, some work about decolonizing, kind of the mind sort of
right,
going
yeah,
on
exactly.
there too. It's not about.
So that's only my own personal mythology.
Right.
It's about working on myself.
Right.
Decolonizing one's own mind,
right.
And then going to work on others, but one must work on themselves, you know,
right.
and
right.
without being totally. I haven't declared my self-importance here lately to any project, but no, but I think one has to be responsible for the work, you know. If one says is an artist or a writer or a photographer or a poet, whatever, then one should be it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean that to be bounding or binding, or, you know, but in the same way, you know, if one claims to be Native American or some, you know, then one should be it, you know. And I'm plenty of friends, close friends, artist friends, and who I never have to worry about making that kind of declaration, you know, or they feel haunted by it later or something, you know.
Right.
So I think it's, you know, one must work on themselves, you know. And
you mentioned Edgar Heap of Birds as being helpful to you, and I see, you know, there is a much smaller circle of artists who are doing this kind of cultural, you know, political kind of activist art. Do you all in Oklahoma anyway? So has it been really helpful to have friendships with those artists? And
oh yes, definitely. It's very lonely out here on the prairie. No, it's
and you've
no,
done
it
group
is.
shows with
Oh
sort
yeah,
of the
yeah,
same.
you know, yes, very nearly. It's loosely formed this artist co-op, you know.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
You know, it was called the Makers.
Oh, okay, so that's the name of the show as well.
And Shanghai Shorn, you know,
Yes.
photography and
Yes.
photography and beadwork, painting and writing and
Right.
conceptual, and it's, you know, it was the same thing. In what ways is art not conceptual to begin with, you know, and so, but so it's very helpful here in Oklahoma, you know, because
Yes.
one is totally surrounded at times by the pure art marketing aspects always, and so I don't argue that, you know, for people who are trying to provide and make a go of it, but I will argue for the point that one should be open to other possibilities, that and not limit oneself to or be disappointed or.
What museums have purchased your work for their permanent collections?
I think Dartmouth. I'm still waiting. It's pending. The National Museum of American Indian is pending. They promised to revisit my work, but
Okay.
with the budget cuts, you know, I mean.
Right, right. The center here.
I'm waiting for the great casino in the sky, the great pie in the sky casino.
What casino commissions do you have coming up?
Oh.
Do you feel you're well represented in Oklahoma, or better represented outside of Oklahoma?
Oh, I'm probably outside of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
That's, you know, I mean, that's the old proverb, and you're, what was it? You're something.
Never a prophet in your own country.
Right? Oh,
I know
such
that.
a cliche, but
Yes.
I hate that. I should be able to, but you know, of course, you know, I'm appreciated just enough, you know, by my family and grandchildren, so that's keeps me. I know it's encouraging, you know, to from time to time to see that the work can be far-reaching, you know, of art, and so.
Have you taught any workshops in art and at any different times?
Oh yeah, you know, I was on the roster for the State Arts Council, visiting artists for many years, and
what years were those?
80s.
In the 80s, okay.
And, so it was a very, you know,
photography and painting, both.
Right, yeah, and creative writing and mixed media and short of art therapy, you know, and that's, I guess, what I meant by the sort of one's personal mythology, you know, and art is a vehicle, or it provides itself, or it can be therapeutic in a sense, you know, that one is willing to, and you know, for me, I think it's an alone endeavor, and not necessarily a lonely one, you know, but workshops, you know, it was a great program for the arts and schools, and because you work subcontract the work, and then you're self-employing yourself, and they're acting as a contractor in the school or wherever site you opt for, and so then it gives you the balance, how much work you want to take on it, and how much you want to pursue your own work. Right. So that was important to me, and so I early on, you know, I think even from the Native American Center days, my probably single greatest provider for me, when I had a young family starting and still trying to keep my art, and Native American Center since hiring us as counselors, youth counselors, using art, substance use program, or these dropout programs, and trying to build some little model. And so I, you know, then at one point I just said, I told my children, I said, well, I want to go sort of full time, trying to pursue this my work, that's my love. So we'll certainly have some harder times ahead. But no, the Arts Council came through, so it's very helpful.
Yes.
And it was a good relevant pay scale and for services. And I you know, I signed up for programs behind the walls, panel systems, and alternative schools, and substance use, you know, and senior citizen centers, and so it's that was fulfilling in that sense, you know. And
it brought something back to your artwork.
Yeah, it helped pay some bills, but the real part of it was, you know, the outreach is to not necessarily people who have how would I say it, interface, or you know, pursue arts. They think it's some kind of leisure activity,
right,
or it's a hobby or something. Can we just,
right.
But it can be more. It can be revealing.
Yes.
It can be sensitive, and you know, for your own self. It just doesn't necessarily have to be shared.
Right.
But it can be well, encouraging in that sense, you know. And you don't have to be a pure artist in a way, you know. It's okay to do it, you know. And
right. You had a one-man show at the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian. What year was that?
2003, I think it was.
2003.
What was the title of that exhibit? It was sort of a transition show from
I couldn't find that.
For the opening of the the new museum in DC. So there was this side in New York, and so it was really good company because you got us selected. So it was a really a great honor for me.
Yeah, what was that like?
And,
they brought you out there. And...
Yeah, and so, but of course for me, I had this great ideals and kinds, but I couldn't realize them because I didn't have the financing, the money, and so there was a great curator named, guy's at the museum, now he's at the museum, but anyway, he called me, and said, well, your name's in this mix, and they really, Truman Lowe, he's Ho-Chunk, Winnebago.
Okay.
And he was a curator at the museum there, and he was also head of the art department at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I've always been a fan of his work, and his great wit, great Winnebago Ho-Chunk humor, and real. But he called me, and so yeah, I was very open, honest with him, I said I don't have the money to realize. I got the idea and the concept and the images I want, but I don't have the proceeds to. So he said, don't worry, that doesn't matter. So just agree to do this. And basically, when he just called me and says, what are you thinking? Wow,
so he kind of bought into your project and provided some funding for that. And allowed you to realize that.
He said, I'll make some arrangements. So, I went to the University of Wisconsin, did a visiting artist, and they had a great digital program there with assistants, and so it was great.
So Richard, what was the project that you ultimately contributed to the Museum of the American Indian show?
Well, it was basically the photo-based image,
Okay.
But as part of this other narrative, and it was a series. Actually, when I had got the call from Truman Lowe, about my name was in the mix and being considered and narrowed down, and so, and I was going through a time there with my sobriety, some other issues, and so I just began making. I just come off of one of my 500-year-old binges and sitting on my front porch alone. Well, those of us in the know of experience, you begin to bottom out, and it doesn't matter who you are, what you are. But the call came from this great man, this great voice, Truman Lowe, this Ho-Chunk, and he has the trickster's quality in his voice. But earlier that evening, I had experiences, and I barely have had the great opportunity to relate it back to Truman. It was this great evening storm blowing up in Oklahoma, summer storm. And across the street from me was all these leaves, and the wind, a little whirlwind began to happen there in that front yard across the street from me. It turned and turned and turned and began to spiral up. And within that spiral of leaves was a black figure. It became the shape of a bird. And then the whirlwind began to move out of the yard and move into the middle of the street. First I was a little fearful, and then I stood up from the chair and walked off a little wooden porch to my yard and walked toward the middle of the street. Huge whirlwind of leaves, and this black bird. And then the wind blew, just went away, and then all the leaves began to trickle down. And this black bird began to come down. And the time it hit the street, it was a big black plastic trash bag. Wow. And Truman's call in that non-verbal communication, and then his call over the phone. So I was that messenger. And a lot of cultures have a messenger, and Yuchis, we have it too. It's particularly a bird. So I began to think about that. And so anyway, it became my theme for my messenger series.
Okay.
With I don't like to call them that. Some people have read. So that's just it's a photo of a dead bird. It's a photo of a dead coyote. It's a photo of a dead buffalo skull. So it is a series about messengers, and it's taken from maybe one of the old ghost dance, Pawnee ghost dance songs, or the messenger says so. The messenger says so. The messenger says so. So anyway, there's these things, and it's really it was a very time in my life as well. Alone.
A big shift.
So it's that pain and a lot of variables in there. Denial and denying help or outreach from others, and so it's a very selfish way to be. And anyway, somehow the messenger came to me, helped me do that art and put the images in the work. And so, it was titled The Messenger series. And
Nice.
Coyote, and the coyote had his own narrative, I asked about it. So it wasn't just a decaying dead coyote. It was a ranch in Texas where they actually shoot coyotes, and hang them up on the trees and fence posts. And so anyway, there's something about that they live, they're alive. I mean, you're actually doing that, but you're not really killing them in that sense. In a real way, you are. So I did these images for that, and I had them, and I hadn't really showed them anywhere. I mean, I'm doing them in a small way, but got a friend to help me load them up, scan them, and build them, So in Wisconsin, printed them on big scale. I scaled them up. I wanted them to scale. I could see them.
So they were large prints.
Yeah.
On vellum or.
Big scale, some real archival paper, So we print them a couple ways, and Truman was a curator, and so we just shipped from Wisconsin straight to New York. So it was great,
Great.
Yeah, it's a really great.
You had a piece accepted by the Vienna Biennial, which is a famous international art show, and I was wondering, was that the same year as Edgar Hoover's?
It was fine. Let's do.
In 2007, or?
Yeah, I think Edgar's was just a couple of years ago. It's the biennial's every 2 years, and so it was just we're now I know the National Museum of American has embraced it, and so now they.
Did they recommend your work for?
Well, earlier than that, we kept, because the biennial, and who's going to represent America, and so they select, so many artists, a couple artists from each country to those pavilions, and so it's a very prestigious and the oldest. Yeah. But of course we know that Native artists, when we are going to be considered, they said. So it was a push, like Bob Houses. Nancy Mantelo, and these formed this sort of artist co-op, some writers, poets, and visual artists, and so can make our own money and take the initiative and curate our own show, and go buy our own space, go take ourselves instead of waiting for the NEA or the selection committees and that whole political process that happens.
Great.
So I just formed in Santa Fe and Imbicus, I think that was the first big show we did. But anyway, everybody pitched in some money or got some sponsorship, and
so you went to Vienna?
Well, I didn't get to go.
Oh.
But the group went,
Right.
So
yeah.
I was trying to think, I was very short there of going, it was one had to finance their own plane ticket as well, so it was really. But it was a great challenge. But I think in but challenging in a real sense for if we're going to be artists, you know, culture workers, and native artists, and then once again, I must echo that. Then we have to be able to take it all on, you know, the challenge of raising and
Right.
to be self-sustaining and self-supporting, like to work that away together and try to go
Right.
instead of waiting for it.
Waiting
I
for it.
mean, we've already done that to the Indian hospitals, you know. I mean,
Right.
the treaties or the settlements, and so someone has to take the initiative, and I think it's a great challenge. At the time, I didn't. You do it.
You know, a lot of your some efforts have sort of gone into trying to, along with Edgar and a number of other people, raise the consciousness of museum curators and the public about, you know, opening up that process to grassroots Indian voices. And what kind of resistance have you encountered? Do you feel like you're making progress there?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, there's much to be done. But no, it's very interesting. I think, you know, at the time we were in the 70s, that is, there was no one writing about our work. They didn't know how to write about it. Of course, there could be a cop-out as well, so we don't know how to write about their work, you know, because they don't understand.
Because they don't want to take the
Yeah,
effort.
so then we spend all of our time training non-Indians about Indian culture and history and process, and we should be training our own people, you know. And so, but now, you know, I've been very fortunate that some great writers, you know, Native women writers and men who are interested in my work, and so it's almost like you don't have to give them the whole 101, Indian 101. They're already there, you know, and so it's a great way, and I think writers, critical writers, know how to read the work, you know, and or can do a different take on your work.
Right.
It's very encouraging
That's
for me.
always nice
I would
too.
never think of the work that way, you know. I didn't. What was my intent? I see, you know. But so no, I think it's the great balance, you know, because our whole focus has been creating the work, you know, and then we really haven't brought it along our writers, our people who know how to read the work and critical writing and curatorial, you know. Of course, it's very hard for them to give that up, you know. Those in a way that's coming from another part of the art world, the official art world, you know, or the official museums, and we shall see, you know, that there still must be done, but also in the same moment to somehow enjoy it too, as you're part of it, and someone's picking you up, or they feel challenged by it, or encouraged in some ways to the curatorial.
You've been moving towards the performing arts, specifically film acting, and I know you had some early experience as an actor in a student film, but you've done War Party at the Institute, you've done War Party, Lakota Woman, you've been in 2 of Sterling Harjo's films, and you had a lead role in his film Barking Water. What was that like, that process?
Well, effort with Sterling, or
With Sterling, that's just...
I'm also a liar and a horse thief, and but no, I think, you know, of course, obviously, film is far-reaching, you know, and greater audiences, and it's you know, I've had to reinvent myself, you know. I'm not a pure painter, and it's too late for me to be a CEO, you know. I'd love to go back to law school, but
You have a great presence.
but I think, you know, one has to, you know, and luckily I'm surrounded by some great grandchildren and young children who have more digital technology savvy than I do, so they come to my aid, and I have friends who have it's so evolving and changing, but it's another way of working, another way of seeing, and but I like the old as well, the oral storytelling. That could be a poet, storytelling, or playwright, or stage. And of course, I heard some great storytellers, storytelling in the home, and most of the time I didn't pay attention. But even the moral ones. But no, I didn't. Of course, some of the greatest storytellers are. Indians love stories. They're great storytellers. And of course, my days in the bar, some great storytelling, man. The Liars Club meets every Saturday, and we play. We close at midnight or closing time. Last liar standing, Some great storytelling, man. God. Old veterans, World War II, or the Indians, non-Indians, didn't matter. So I like that. And then, of course, a large part of my life has been with sort of the non-verbal communication,
Right.
The visual
And that's
arts.
a very important part of film acting. Did you contribute some lines, actually, and some action to Barking Water that maybe Sterling Harjo had not, that were not in the script? Did you do a little bit of improvising?
Yeah, I want to add my credit line for No, Sterling was great to work with, and worked with him on the Four Sheets to the Wind.
Right.
And my sister Casey Camp, was a
Right.
theater, and had worked with Sterling on a short piece called Goodnight Irene.
Yes.
And so, but anyway, he, Casey told me, he sort of had he told me, I didn't know this till after the fact, so he sort of had us in mind for some project, and it turns out it was Barking Water.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first worked with him was Four Sheets to Wind, and it was in a studio in Tulsa, and it was this narrative of
Right.
voice in the Muskogee language, and so language totally opposite from the Yuchi language.
Exactly.
So it was,
And you did a
it was
great
a
job.
short couple of hours in the studio in Tulsa. Turned out to be an all night, and went to a couple of engineers and who stayed with us till 5:30 the next morning. I think we left the studio, and
Wow.
in fact, the studio technician at the board who stayed with us was probably speaking better Muskogee than me, man, when we left. He was correcting me. But no, it was great to work with Sterling because he realized the importance of the language, and I said, yeah,
Yes.
I live here, man. I got to live here, man. We got to get this right. But he knew the importance of the language
Yeah.
since he grew up with his grandmother, so it was great, a great way to work. Just sound it out and not memorize it, But I
Right.
hung around some,
Right.
I'd heard
You
Creek when I was a child, and
recognize
so
it, yeah.
I remember these sort of nuances of it. And but no, I think it did working with him on Barking Water. He would sit down with Casey and I and tell us this is how he's felt this scene, how he's seen it, how he wrote it. These characters are seen, and but it's also very open. He asked us, "How do you see it? Or how would you do it?"
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we did it off his page script, and he gave us an option for us to improv, or it was open to our suggestions. There was some scenes, Casey and both and I agreed. So, well, we probably wouldn't say anything in our anger. More contained, we would internalize our anger. Huh? It's too easy or too obvious to physically do it. But the internalizing of it is the simmering, the real pain, anger is. So he was open to that. So it was a great way to work with him as a director, and then at the same time, gain the trust.
Right. I've always liked your titles, the way that you kind of have play on words and irony or humor. How important is it for you to find the right title for a painting or a photograph?
Oh, but I visually, idealistically, so visually the work should stand on its own, and
So it's not.
wouldn't necessarily have to have a title.
It's not
But then but you know, there's no rules, you know, that I've broken. But no, I like to play on words, and I like titles, and but I also believe in a strong visual work can stand on its own, and then sometimes you have to consider, well, maybe this reading too much in the title can take them away from the visual language. It can be misleading, or they need to bring, the viewer needs to bring it.
Right.
And so, you know, I've added titles and text and in the work, and intentionally. I mean, it's part of the work for me. But no, I'm not really bound by that, or I think depends on the work, you know. And I love the word play, you know, to begin with, because in my Yuchi language, I'm not speaking it enough, you know. It's a language I don't speak enough. And for English, I'm not totally Oklahoma vernacular, you know. I got this great debate, or not a great debate, but the woman had this title of a painting called Rain Crow. Well, she translated. She's researched it all the way back. It was not a rain crow, you know. It's a thrush, or it's from this certain bird family, and it's not a crow at all. That's why I know it. Does it look like a crow, or whatever the paint is? You know? Your title, right? What is the study of birds? What's that called?
Or an anthology.
We know it's a big one in Norman with George Sutton, you know, the bird
Yes.
The study. And so anyway, she sent me all the Latin pronunciation, italics, and the whole background to this. I said, no, it's Oklahoma vernacular. It's how I heard it as a child, you know.
Right.
I heard the sound first.
Right.
Then, you know, I heard people refer to rain crow or evening crow, rain crow. It wasn't a call, you know, crow. So, but so there was a title, you know, that challenged this person.
Right.
And that's, well, it's vernacular, you know. That's all I was after. And so, you know, that didn't sit too well with that person. You know.
I wanted to ask you about your signature, Soyoha, or I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, which means Yuchi in the Yuchi language. Is that kind of a statement as well?
It's time for my Hank Williams song.
It's not, yes, not as bad as
And when the Lord made me, He made a rambling man.
Yes, so in terms of, you know, not actually being actually the name, just basically saying, this is my name is the same as my tribe, you know, not an Indian name per se, but it's just that word. Is that a statement about maybe taking the ego a bit out of being an artist with that individual name, or was it anything that you...
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
It's a very good take, yeah. I think it is a really, you know, it's a very ego-based endeavor too, you know, artists are such individuals, you know, it's my ideal, it's my painting, it's my process, so, and then the counter to that, you know, or the counterbalance to that, I think is co-op, you know, I mean, ceremonial, the other well-being of the community or tribe or family, larger families. It's always been communal, you know. Put that in. So, and like collaboration today, you know, in America, it's very hard. It's so individualistic, but in some cultures, you know, and indigenous cultures, for sure. So it's been part of the survival. So, yeah, I think I was consciously considering that, you know, but you know, Soyoha is, well, I was thinking of that a few days ago. we have this word, now it's a concept, or it's prayer, go ahead, Antoinette's our reference to creator or God or maker. But literally, when in English, go ahead, it's breath, life's breath is what it really is. So even without religion or overly religious overtones, a reference to go ahead, Antoinette's, go ahead, life's breath. So I think about how I heard my grandmother and some of the old people talking, they would make these great reverent prayers for us when we were children, without going to church or in a small room, bed. Yeah, so I was thinking of that, that whole thing, because in the strange thing of juxtaposing or translating English into making some sense in some Indian concept, or back the other way. But I know the Soyaha, they call me different names, they can give you different names and nicknames, funny names, busted shoes, I was barefoot all summer. I never would wear socks, overalls, or give you funny, different, or they're going to be very prominent, proud names too. There's different ways, the nicknames, So, likes walleye, likes grape dumplings, hangs on the apron. Well, but so there was, but I tried to identify sun man, Soya, then Soya is so it's sun, Soya, it's sort of the sun being. So they have these matrilineal and a woman's view too on takes, the sun was literally ministrating the blood. So the offspring of the sun. So in the language when they're saying it, it's a different way than the English way. Blood of the sun, children of the sun, Yuchi. Then the Yuchi is, I think, Creek or some other reference to, as you know. Then the Caltech with Yuchi, or like Creek is Muskogee, And so there's, everyone has that, some other name for themselves, but I was thinking of Soya, and sun, it's called a sun boy, sun boy. It could be like Chobani, sun boy, not like sunny boy, sun boy. Then get older and give you another name, Or it could be like busted shoes.
Yeah. I think your work's been really important in a lot of ways for the, I know Yuchis are still trying to push for federal recognition, but the work that you've done in terms of representation, I think it's been really important for that.
Yeah, once we were at a conference in Atlanta, I think it was, somewhere in Atlanta, Georgia, but the Yuchis make these pilgrimages, used to in the 50s, 60s. My mother, grandma told me when they were in 1955, they went down there, they go down to the mounds, for the mound culture. And I used to go down with Addie George in the 70s, 80s, and we were down once in the 70s, and it's a conference, an archaeologists or anthropologists, big conference. And there was a professor or some professional historian giving this lecture on, who were the Yuchi, And there we were in the lobby. There we were in the lobby. There was Jim Skeeter and Addie George and Wildcats, and the language being spoken right there in the lobby among them walking through, And there was this paper being delivered in the past tense, So, and then, obviously it takes a real reversal of that, and we have to do it.
Yes.
But, so I did a painting from that, with that, who are the question. I answer your question, who are the Yuchi, with the question, who are the Yuchi.
Yeah.
So, anyway, but I remember that I was saying, well, we've long sought this recognition, but to being, they had the green corn, these ceremonies, that's how we keep being who we are. You know? I remember some of the old men now we sat on the arbor with, they're gone, and I tell it, because I always wanted to videotape and do documents. He said, no, you don't have time for that. You have to be, you participate. That's how you keep it going. Okay, okay, play back to, but you have to participate to keep it alive and ongoing, and you're part of it.
Right.
You're responsible, your time of being responsible, or your contribution is you're participating in whatever capacity, but yeah, so I think that say with or without the recognition, and I always say that Yuji hai akano, gashtali akano, Yuji hano, yandala. Of course we are these people, always have been. And the question you ask, who are these? But of course we are these people. So I guess that's what I've always asked myself. Some of your questions too. What part of my personal mythology and tribal mythology, and what's there to know, and then what's there to explain or share. Do it visually, do it through theater. There's and politically.
Yeah.
Legislation. So there's all kinds of ways of working, and I think sometimes you feel like, wow, you're not doing enough, or seeing the results, and I'm a non-practicing Buddhist too, so.
But you never know the impact you're having. So
it's this life's bread. I think about that, the Buddhist philosophy, or this Yuchi thing, life's breath, You're running on life's breath, and I have this interest in yoga. Excuse me, the Buddhists, and they have this thing about breathing.
Right.
Consciously being in the moment, and it's fleeting. Like this interview is behind this moment, and it's to be treasured, so that somebody can capture that, and I've seen the Dalai Lama wink once. So.
Well, do you have anything else to add, or would you like to talk about some of your work next? I'd like to take a couple of pictures of some.
Yeah, we could do the work, huh?
Ready to go if you'd like to talk about your painting, Richard. And you can stay close to the mic if you like. Or...
Well, that painting must be in 77, 78. It came back to me in a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. A couple out of Tulsa sent me this image email and asked me if I was the artist. And I told them I wasn't. They wanted to know if I wanted to buy it back. And they were downsizing their home and moving and traveling, and so I asked them, well, what price would they pay for it? And says, well, I couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
That's not what I saw. But anyway, they made it available to me, and so it returned to me. And so I think that's, for me, is the 1978, I think this painting is from, and it came back. And so I've... and once, the early messenger, I guess, the hawk, the eagle, the red sun, and it's stretched on willow.
Yes.
It's a real heavy
really
textured
nice.
With feathers and texture, leather, canvas.
Yeah.
Texture and real layered, heavy. So it's a real part
dimensional.
Of my, yeah, real part of my textured narrative, my how I found myself, real textured and layered.
This is a very well-known photograph of yours.
Yeah, it became, the photolithograph. Do Indian artists go to Santa Fe when they die? And actually, the image is from Santa Fe, 1969, II campus, and even today I'm still friends with all the people in the group shot. And the person on the end is the only person in the group who's deceased, Terry Williams, who was from Pawnee, Oklahoma. So the image became a tribute to him as well, you know. The person next to him is Louise Harrison, Cheyenne, from Elk City. Great beat worker, and we were, you know, her and I rode the Greyhound bus out to Santa Fe together, you know, and she sat in front of the bus, I sat in the back of the bus. We didn't even talk to each other, so she was so shy. And got to Albuquerque, we transferred buses, never said a word to each other. Typical Indians, Take me 50 years later to say I love you, you know, so anyways. Benita Tavenpot, Fort Duchesne, Utah, Ute. I seen her at II alumni Indian Market 2 years ago, I think.
Neat.
First could see her in first person again, then myself in the hat, and Anime One Star from Rosebud, South Dakota, and Sydney Eyre from Fort Thompson, South Dakota, Crow Creek Reservation, and we were all fellow students. And this particular day, we'd gone to put on a little performance with our regalia. So anyway, it was so hence the title, you know.
Right.
Of course, this is a this is a reversal, the negative fix. I was interested in the solarization sort of feel, and look at them looking at us, looking back at them, and so it's, you know, like, you know, I've always thought about that, you know, like perhaps I might be interested in your culture as well,
right?
You know, and then one is looking back and being looked at and looking back, so that's part of the positive and negative. So I wanted to lead the gray tone scale there.
Okay, you want to talk about this piece?
I had this entitled, what was it called? Mixed Blessings. Mixed Blessings, I think I titled this. You know, it's an experimental piece, and I became interested in this sort of the pixelization, or the pixelization breakdown, if you will. And it began as a pure image, I should say, black and white color film, Kodak film, and then once we got it in Photoshop, you know, then we began to play with it. But anyway, some was accidental. The color scheme, so I just was open to it.
Right.
So I wasn't intentional, and then it's a mixed media, and then I've added some
painting,
photo-based paints to it, and then there'll be another element on and sort of got the blur on there now. But no, I was interested in always. I have a long fascination of interest for buffalo skulls, and so I collect them. And so I was actually shooting a photo of, the buffalo skulls in shadows, and then it's just a mounted time photo camera.
Of yourself holding the skull.
Yeah, because I'm never into photos enough. So it's a little. But no, I just wanted to play it. So, you know, once again, personal mythology.
Right.
Developing one's own personal mythology.
Right.
You know, it's like people having their own favorite part in the sky, you know, or a favorite star.
Okay, and we're going to look at one more piece here.
And this one again is once kind of juxtapositioning some early black and white negative film images. Actually, I shot these images in L.A. down in Hollywood and Sunset Boulevard. There's a big billboard campaign, you know, when new movies come out, and that particular year I was taking these pictures was, I think, Dances of Wolves that came out, you know.
Oh, wow.
So I became interested in shooting the billboards, and But anyway, then there was this, of course, this icon Marlboro cowboy.
Yes, yes.
And then down the street a few blocks was this Hollywood Cherokee building. So I juxtaposed them, and it's painted, and so it's not a pure photograph, not a pure painting, and but it's part of a series I did called "The Absence of Our Presence," and the presence of our absence.
Right.
A body of work with public images or public information or public icons that have references to Native Americans, and the cowboy has now become the symbol for the West, and,
Right.
and then but anyway, so it's and I've been doing it. I'm going to print it. This may become a print.
Okay. Great.
But I still have to compress it one more time. It's gessoed on the back and gessoed on the front, so it's got to be run through a press now, and I got to seal it to a masonite board.
Oh. And would you like to talk about this photograph?
Well, Walter Strader was Rapo was one of my beloved friends, one of the first elders I met on the streets, and befriended and became friends, and invited him to my home and see him. And so, and he participated with me, made himself available for a number of photos, and this one, of course, was a man's best friend. Even he was walking, and he had this pup, young pup dog, and but mostly, I was after, how do you say it, his humanity, and he offered that and reflected that, I should say. And so I became part of my early, I called him Street Chief number 1, number 2, but he was 78s and 80s. I documented him over a number of years, and invited him to my home to eat, and introduced him to my children, and very important person that came to my life, we met and came to.
It's a wonderful piece of work. Well, Richard, thank you so much for your time today.